Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Butte Local Agency Formation Commission meeting. Today is Thursday, February 1st. The first thing we're going to do, let's do a flag salute. And then, if you will indulge me, I'd like to have a moment of silence. A dear friend of mine lost a relative yesterday. Amen. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Bolin,
Here.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Kimmelshoe,
Here.
Chair Connolly,
Here.
Commissioner McGreehan,
Here.
Commissioner Duncan, Commissioner Betts,
Here.
alternate Commissioner Bradley,
Here.
alternate Commissioner Rust, alternate Commissioner Ritter, alternate Commissioner Shepherd. Thank you.
Okay. Next up is a consent agenda. It's approval of minutes of December 7th. And just for, is there any electronic comments on the agenda today? On any item? Okay, then I won't ask again. So I'll entertain a motion unless there's an error or change.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Next up is the LAFCo Paradise Irrigation District Public Review, Draft Municipal Review, Service Review, sorry.
Morning, Commissioner.
Good morning. First of all, I just want to bring to your attention on your DS, you have a letter that came in from John Stonebreaker. It came in just this morning, literally just a few minutes ago, and we printed these out and provided to you. There are some comments in here, some errors he believes, but I'm just going to let it sit for now. And when the consultant and the Paradise Irrigation District representatives have their time, they will address any errors that they believe in here. And then any corrections, we will simply make as a motion as a part of the approval, if that's what you desire, and then we would make those corrections in the final. So there's no reason to necessarily return to address these. So I'll just put this aside for now and we'll get back to it. So as the agenda says, this is the municipal service review for the Paradise Irrigation District. And we have been working on this for approximately a year. It's a document that you've all seen before, not this particular PID, but MSRs. We do these periodically on every agency. It gives us a service review, snapshot of what that agency's capabilities are and any deficiencies that they might have, and determinations that the commission thinks may be useful in the future. Just remember, determinations are just that. They're essentially recommendations as to things that we think might have value. They're not directives to the district or anybody else that they have to do something. We don't have that kind of authority. So having said that, what I want to do first is just talk about some real key things from a staff perspective, and then I'm going to turn it over to our consultant, Kateri Harrison, who will give you a more in-depth PowerPoint presentation. And then at that point, we can invite the PID representatives to also discuss the document and any concerns or thoughts they have. First of all, I just want to start off with the really good news, and that's right there on the first page, that the PID, as we all know, went through a traumatic event over the last 5 years, starting with the Camp Fire and then all the other things that have transpired since that they've had to deal with. What is really remarkable here is, given the total devastation of the community and this water system 5 years ago, today, good, clean quantities of flowing treated water are coming to every single home who desires it in the town of Paradise. And just right off the bat, it's an exceptional accomplishment on the part of the PID and the town for the cooperation they have provided the district as well. So on those 2 points, I just really want to just drill down on 2 things, because for me, this MSR really detailed 2 things that are of fundamental importance. One, water quality and availability. As you all know, you knew what the system was right after the fire. Water quality, water quantity, all these were issues that they had to fight through to put out clean treated water. And to this day, now we have 4,881 active customers and another 5,700 standby customers, and they are all plumbed to the extent that anybody has asked for water is now getting water, and that water is high quality water. So again, whether there was a fire or never was a fire, any district who can say that is a district that's doing good. The second mark, which was almost as much difficulty, if not more, than fixing the system, was physical issues. Obviously, having your entire customer base depleted in a matter of a day does a number to your budget. So what the district has been able to achieve in that 5 years with both the rebuild of their internal processes as well as the external money that has come into them as a result of grants and insurance claims and the PG&E settlement, they are now today sitting on a net position of $163 million, give or take, when this information was actually put out. That is an incredible story for PID. And I will say, just since I also know it, is the town also is in a really strong fiscal position as well. Both have come out of that process very favorably. So right off the bat, clean water and a sound financial system. So that's what this MSR to me really says. I'm going to skip ahead to just some key findings here because I think they deserve a little attention. Excuse me. On the shared purpose under the analysis, we have always been talking, as long as I have been here, which has been a while, there's been talk about PID and the town coming together in some way, reorganizing in some way. The fire really catalyzed that discussion for a period of time, and it was seriously looked at in what was then known as the 2022 options study, where the state came in, and I've informed all of you over that over the last few years. It was certainly an option, but what we're saying here now is with the solvency of both the town and the PID, the incredible need that was once seen is not there anymore. That's not to say that cooperation and reorganization may someday be a good idea, but it's not the imperative that folks might have thought it to be at the beginning of the process. Both communities work well, both the district and the town work well together. Excuse me. And certainly there are efficiencies that could still be gained between the town and PID in terms of what they share in terms of services. And we know from doing this document that while there's no particularly formal agreements, there are quite a few examples that exist at the field level where they're seamlessly working together as it is today. I'm sorry. So on that note, what else we're saying is on the determinations that the PID should periodically review its relationship with the town. And when we do the town, we're going to say the same thing to the town. This is not, I think, eye-opening event. This is something that good agencies should continue to do no matter what. Anytime you can find cooperation where efficiencies can be gained, that's to be promoted. And so what we're saying here is just because you're sound and you can move forward separately and independently, you have a lot of shared variables, shared population, shared elected official base, shared resources. These are things that both agencies can continue to work on together to benefit the residents of Paradise. So this is not in any way a ding or a promotion of that. It's just simply an acknowledgement that let's just keep working at it and maybe we can actually improve the system as it is. With fiscal matters, I want to just, I've already talked about it. The reality is you're looking at a revenues of around $6,900, $7 million a year versus expenses of around $9 million a year. So about a $2 million gap right there. I would be troubled by that if this was an ongoing process, but this is not a large gap. And again, in comparison to their net position, again, $163 million or so, and the ongoing process of new connections coming online literally almost every day, at least every week or so, that gap is going to start to close as well. I'm not particularly worried about that gap. And the fact is now moving forward, we can only expect to see that gap continue to close as more and more customers come online. If that wasn't the case, we might ask for more. But nonetheless, in an abundance of caution, we want to continue to review that. And the next time we look at their MSR, we're going to look back a period of time from here forward and determine if that is in fact improved. And I believe it will. But right now, it's not a crisis by any means. It's just an observation that once again, on a financial footing, the PID is very sound. Moving forward on under disadvantaged communities, this is an area that is often misunderstood and folks don't even know what it is in some cases. But this language is peppered through state law now, whether it's utility providers or general plans for cities and counties, LAFCo MSRs. This language has permeated almost every aspect of the state. Unfortunately, like the state does, it's not all equally evaluated. Some are called this, some are called disadvantaged unincorporated communities. There's a lot of terminology that is not consistent between state programs, but nonetheless, it all comes down to one thing. You need to identify who those disadvantaged populations are. Those populations are people who are 80% below the median household income average for the state. And as you can see in the report, the state is at about 88,000. These numbers change. Some numbers come from different locations, but they're all relatively close. So if that 80% number is a $71,000 median household. So anybody below 71,000 on the ridge or anywhere in the state for that matter would automatically, just by default, because of the way they do this, the numbers, becomes a disadvantaged unincorporated community. And for that triggers certain things that we all have to do. The most key thing that happens with disadvantaged communities is they're just not getting served. Somehow they get bypassed. And that's the reason all this came to be starting about 10 years ago. I can say very, very happily here in this county that while we have a number of disadvantaged communities, for instance, on the ridge, but every single person on the ridge has availability of water. Nobody's being bypassed because of that. It's just the unfortunate circumstance of our economy. It's the same thing in Oroville when we did theirs. There was a lot of disadvantaged communities in and around Oroville, but the fact is they all had access to clean, fresh water through South Feather, through Cal Water, Thermalito. They all had access to sewer systems. Really what the state was doing when they looked at disadvantaged communities was these were places mostly in the Central Valley where sewer lines and water lines would just go around them. They would not get served. And they needed to do something to force those agencies to start serving them. We're not seeing that in our county. Where we have the largest disadvantaged communities, we also have some very well-run special districts who provide those services. So it is in fact available. That's not to say it's always economically possible, but it is in fact available from an infrastructure standpoint. So having said that, where this plays into this document, again, and I want to refocus on the idea that these are recommendations and observations. These are not things that we're saying anybody has to do. But with respect to PID, they do have a standby fee. And that standby fee is paid by those 5,738 customers and generates about $1.4 million a year. This is a disadvantaged community, so we felt compelled under the law to at least discuss this to the level that we could make a case. We're not saying that a standby fee is not correct or not common in the industry, because it certainly is. And they did it correctly and they did it legally. Now, all that this document is suggesting is looking at what we know to be the duck population and the incredible restrictions on rebuilding for a lot of folks who are in that category of making $30,000 to $50,000 a year and have no hope of ever rebuilding on their lot. Either because they can't afford the actual build, they can't afford the insurance that comes after the build, so forth and so on. These folks are still going to be compelled to pay the standby fee for a vacant lot. Again, I want to emphasize it was illegally accomplished and it was done correctly by PID. The question we have is with $163 million net position, you have a standby fee generating $1.4 million a year. You can do the math. That standby fee could be adjusted, lifted, suspended for some period of time and probably not financially harm the district in any dramatic way. I'm sure the district has a different view on that because, again, they did it legitimately and it's not an uncommon fee to charge. We just happen to have a very unique population of people and circumstances that are involved. So all we're saying is take a look at it. If you think you can reduce it or suspend it or in some way ameliorate that problem, we would ask you to do that, ask them to do that. And if they end at the end of the day, it stays the same. At the end of the day, it's PID's choice to decide that, not ours to decide that. We're just pointing out something that they might want to consider. And finally, I get to the last two pages here, and one of them is on water supply. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I just really wanted to once again put in the determinations that clearly indicate that folks on the ridge have no shortage of water. And looking down the future, many, many years, no shortage of water. They are going through a process. There's always going to be the process of perfecting your water rights. There's always going to be a process where the state looks at things moving forward to change on us, move the ball, if you will, on us. But at this point in time, the folks on the ridge should feel really good that their PID has a substantial, legally available quantity of water that will feed this ridge population for decades to come. So we just want to point that out once again. Water quality, water quantity, not an issue for the PID. The last section on here deals with sphere of influence considerations. This is not a sphere plan today. We'll be coming back with that in the future. But it talks about, just in general terms, some of the observations of what could happen when we look at a sphere, expanding their SOI. PID gets bigger. We don't necessarily see that. I don't think PID necessarily sees that right now, given that the ridge is fairly contained as it's been for decades. And we don't see that really substantially changing. And then possible reorganizations. Again, these are things where we're looking at cooperative relationships between PID, Town of Paradise, Paradise Park and Rec District, and so forth. Again, we're not saying any of those agencies are doing anything wrong now or poorly now, just can they continue to work together? And I can tell you, just from what I know, and Mr. McGrean can certainly elaborate as well, is we're always here in Park and Rec talking to other folks about what they want to do. And there's a lot of cooperation. So again, not suggesting that it needs to happen or even that it should happen, but it should always be something to consider, because you just never know when that efficiency is going to pop up and it makes sense. And if it does, you should talk about it. So again, those are recommendations that will come later when we do the sphere plan, and none of them are directives to do any particular thing. Public notice comment. This has been widely distributed twice, in fact, and it was at the Paradise Irrigation District office. It was on our website. It was on their website. We also put it in the Paradise Library for some time. It was in our office available. It was circulated to all the relative agencies, County of Butte and all their departments. It was circulated to Paradise Recreation and Park District, circulated to the Town of Paradise. We have gotten comments back briefly from the Town of Paradise and in an informal way through a staff meeting. I think we rectified some of that. It was related to some population numbers, some of which is reflected in Mr. Stonebreaker's issue. But I think that cooperation with the town was allowed us to then revise the document and put some corrected numbers. And I know Ms. Harrison will talk a little bit about that as she goes through her process. And we had a public workshop up at the Paradise Irrigation District boardroom on the 16th of January, about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Sadly, there was 3 of us there, 4 of us there, and we were all staff. So even though I had gotten a lot of phone calls, certainly about the standby charge, which is why I brought in there, and I also mentioned in my staff report, I wanted to make a particular note for all the phone calls I got complaining about that. And I told all of those folks that there was a public workshop coming up and that would be a great time to talk to staff. Those folks did not show up at the public workshop. And I'm not seeing them here today either. And they were all made aware of all these meetings. Doesn't mean their concern is not valid, but you can draw your own conclusions about whether somebody takes the time to come to something to actually make their point. So we think we did a fairly good outreach. In turn, we got no comments back from Paradise Park and Rec. We got a comment back from the County of Butte, who basically said we circulated to all departments and the county has no issues with the document. So at this point, what we think we have is a document that was circulated. It was reviewed. You're going to hear about a few really minor changes that are factual that we can make today. In terms of numbers, but no outswell of any particular concern from any constituency group that came into us. And I don't think we're going to see that today from what I can see. This is because it's a document that is simply for planning purposes. It is exempt from environmental review, which is what that portion talks to you about. So in conclusion, I just want to let you know that before you hear this, your options today will be you can approve it with amendments, or we can continue this to a later date if something comes up that you feel just can't get resolved today. Our option and our recommendation is to make whatever fundamental changes need to be made today, direct that in your motion when you ask us if you choose to approve it. And then we will make those changes in the final document, and it will not have to return to the commission for any additional hearings. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions, or if not, I'll turn it over to Katari.
Questions or comments by the board? Is there any public comment? Go ahead.
Sorry, Chair. First and foremost. Oh, it's this one, sorry. I'm so sorry.
There you go.
Thank you for that excellent explanation, Stephen. I'm kind of curious. I realize the essence of the MSR, that a lot of the recommendations in there are suggestions. The recipient agency, PID in this case, is not obligated to accept them necessarily or act on them, but I am kind of curious during the public review process and so forth. I realized the minimum public review period was adhered to, which is like approximately 21 days or something like that. But it's coincidental in my jaded way of thinking, but the timing of this document coming out in late December, the holidays that took place shortly thereafter, the change in the weather and so forth, and still the essence of just the populace so busy up there and various, I'm wondering why a longer public hearing period wasn't considered rather than just 21 days. In addition to that, you have the public workshop, which I appreciate was done, but it was on a Friday evening.
Tuesday afternoon.
January 16th, I believe, was a Friday. Was it a Tuesday? Okay. But it's sad that I realized no public attended, but who was there other than just staff? Was any board members of PID present for the presentation? One of the standing committees perhaps of PID as opposed to the full board? I don't know, but that probably would have been helpful in some respects. I don't know, but we'll get to that point. I realize that. Frankly, just as one individual, I'm surprised that no commentary was received from some of the other agencies. It sounds like you got some verbally from the town of Paradise, which is good, but I can only speak for PRPD. I'm surprised. I know I announced that to my peers on the board and to the staff that the workshop was underway, and I was hoping that they're at minimum make an attendance effort there to give insight and input to the PID staff as well as yourselves. We had a consultant firm that authored the lion's share of this MSR and worked in collaboration with the LAFCo staff. Let me ask this question. Amongst all the varied suggested recommendations in the MSR, one is referred to as by the author. Is that the consultant firm's recommendation and not LAFCo staff?
It came through the consultant process, but frankly, once it's in print and this document becomes ours, that's our comment.
Okay. So as our executive director, you're recommending all those suggestions.
I have
As-
reviewed
as-
this document multiple times over. We've made many changes over the months prior, and
Right.
so this document has my blessing.
Good. Okay. I appreciate that. It'd be interesting to hear from the PID standpoint when Mr. Lando gets up and speak, whether at the staff level, he's appreciative of those suggestions and has anything to add to them in any way, shape, or form, just for the benefit of LAFCO today. I'd like to hear that. That's pretty much it. Sorry.
Okay. Any other comments by board members?
I'll have a few comments, but I'll wait till after.
I might not let you talk. You're up. While you're coming up here, it is frustrating to be an official appointed or elected and nobody comes to the meetings, but it's not uncommon. It really isn't uncommon. Right? Unless there's something that hits your pocketbook, then they all show up that day. You're up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. My name is Kateri Harrison. I've owned a small consulting firm called Swale Inc. for the past 15 or so years. And my team and I have worked on about 60 municipal service reviews for LAFCos in Northern California. So good morning. It's great to be with you on this rainy day in February. We're here to talk about the Paradise Irrigation District, of course, and I wanted to acknowledge all the assistance that my consulting team received from Steve Lucas, the executive officer, and Shannon Costa, your deputy executive officer, and then also from PID staff, Mickey Rich and Tom Lando, and they're both in the audience and will probably say a few words after I'm finished speaking, but their assistance was really quite wonderful. If any of you have any questions while I'm giving my presentation, please let me know and I'll stop, and Shannon's going to change slides for me. So next slide, please. So the task that was assigned to the consulting firm was to update the 2006 Municipal Service Review that was previously written for Paradise Irrigation District. And that's what we're presenting to you today, is just an updated version of that document. We also looked at the information that was in the Town of Paradise Municipal Service Review that was done in 2007. And the next slide, please. The key difference between that 2006 MSR and this new updated one that you see before you today is that we updated all the data. So the numbers have all been updated, but we also added a bibliography. So you'll see in text citations to show you exactly where we got the data from. And that's just to model one of LAFCo's goals, which is transparency. So government transparency. We try to make these MSRs transparent so everybody knows where we got the data from. Additionally, there's a lot more detail in this MSR compared to the old one about the watershed and water quality, as Mr. Lucas previously mentioned. There are 10 appendices that just provide background information. And then the entire document is about 289 pages, but most of the chapters focus on each determination that LAFCO is required to make. So for example, chapter 6 describes disadvantaged unincorporated communities, and chapter 8 describes the financial ability to provide services. So that's the overall structure of the document. Shannon, change slides. So this is a little screenshot of the determinations regarding accountability and community service needs. We used key performance indicators to kind of structure the determinations that we made. Each determination, for example, this topic, accountability and community service needs, is required by the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act. Next slide. This slide talks about growth and population projections. You'll see on the, I guess it's our left, a map of the Paradise Irrigation District boundary and sphere of influence. Their boundary is 11,438 acres, and their sphere of influence is a little bit smaller at 1,325 acres. Their boundary includes 10,649 assessors parcels. You'll also see the determinations that we made regarding population projections, and populations was one of the issues Mr. Stonebreaker mentioned in his letter. He was concerned about projections looking into the future. So one thing we did in this MSR, you'll notice, I think we released the first version in late November, I think it was, and we received a comment from the Town of Paradise. We had used data from the California Department of Finance and the Butte Association of Governments. That was based in 2021, and the Town of Paradise staff asked us to update that to the 2022 and 2023 data, which we did, obviously. It was a very helpful suggestion, happy to do that. The comment in the letter is about population projections looking into the future. So nobody has a crystal ball. Neither do I, but what we did is we just used standard calculations. The California Department of Finance projects the state population and projects the county population, and we just used that same methodology and projected a population for the town of Paradise. And obviously, they're still in recovery mode, so their population growth has been a bit slow. Next slide.
Was there any consideration that the sewer is gonna add a denser population than it did before the fire?
In the text, we did talk about infill development, and that I mean, every jurisdiction in California is looking at infill development just because there's been so many state housing laws that have been passed in the past few years to encourage infill development. So obviously the new sewer line will help that. But even with projected population growth, the Paradise Irrigation District should have sufficient water supply, which is the key issue that we're looking at. I think in terms of other municipal services, that's one of the reasons we have a recommendation in this MSR to suggest that LAFCo and the town of Paradise work to update their MSR later, whenever it can get on your work program. Okay, next slide. This map shows the disadvantaged unincorporated communities. It's a color ramp, so the darker blue areas have higher income, and as you tend towards gray and beige, that's the lower income areas. I think the key word in this disadvantaged unincorporated communities, DUCs, is the word unincorporated. So all those areas that you see that are within the town boundary are not classified as DUCs. It's only those areas that are outside the town boundary. So in that sense, from LAFCO's standpoint, we're looking at a very small area, but we wanted to show the whole community and model that. And there's this, it's hard after a catastrophe like the Camp Fire to rebuild, especially to provide affordable housing for those lower income neighborhoods. So in a lot of ways, the town of Paradise is, for better or for worse, a model for other communities about how to do it. And they're encountering challenges, which is to be expected. But they're doing obviously the best that they can. So that we're put in a recommendation to study that in more detail in a future MSR focusing on the town itself. Next slide, Shannon, please. And this slide just shows the wording of the recommendation. There are a number of suggestions to look at when you do that future MSR that your staff can just put in the scope of work for that document. Next slide. We looked at detail in the present and planned capacity of public facilities. We got most of our data from PID's 2020 Urban Water Management Plan. And like Steve said, they have good water quality. They do a lot of preventative maintenance, and they have sufficient funds dedicated to their capital improvement plan. Next slide, please. The next determination is the financial ability of an agency to provide services. We looked at several key performance indicators for finances. One of them was comparing revenues to expenses. And as Executive Officer Lucas previously mentioned, there is a gap, obviously, between the revenue shown in the blue bars in this graph and the expenses shown in the red bars. But they have made steady improvement since the 2018 campfires. The blue bars are going up. So it's something to note and be aware of, not necessarily any huge concern given their total net position, but just something to keep in mind and look at again in the next MSR for PID. Next slide, please. This slide just shows the kind of an example of the determinations and the key performance measures that we looked at. One cool thing about this municipal service review is we use the same key performance indicators that were used in the previous MSR that we did for the Oroville area. So South Feather Water Power Agency, Thermalito, Lake Oroville, PUD. We use the same key performance measures. So now you can compare PID to those other agencies, apples to apples. And then you can also compare them to other municipal service reviews that we've done in other parts of the state, like the El Dorado Irrigation District. We use these same performance measures. All the water districts along North Lake Tahoe, we use the same performance measures. So now if someone was interested, they could compare, regionally on a Northern California level. Next slide. Status and opportunities for shared facilities. We basically followed the LAFCo service review guidelines for these key performance measures, and they are cooperating with a lot of nearby and adjacent agencies. But this is also the point where we had the recommendation to, at some point in time, take another look at reorganization possibilities, like nothing urgent now, but maybe in the future, they might want to take a look at options. Next slide. Oh, it's the end. So we had a team of people working on this, and it was a very enjoyable process. We learned a lot. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions. Oh, I do want to just say one or two things about the comment letter that we have. First of all, it's really wonderful that people provide comments. I think it's really helpful. So there were 2 typos that the gentleman noted. He said page 1-4 should say meetings are at 5:30, and he's right. That was my mistake. I put 6:30 on page 1-4, so I'll change that to 5:30. And then he also found another typo on page 1-8 about, it should say chapter 3 introduction, and he's right, of course. So I'll fix that typo and change that 3 to a 2 or 2 to a 3. And then, we discussed the population issue. And I'll let Tom and Mickey follow up on any other details in the letter. Any questions for me?
Questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, and looking through the documents, you can go ahead and stand up there.
Okay.
Okay. And looking through the document and even your comments, Steve, since there is such an abundance of water at Paradise Irrigation District, I think maybe it was barely mentioned about possibly using that water to service other municipalities. Possibly there's been some talk about working with the city of Chico. And that would obviously increase the revenue of Paradise Irrigation District. Is that something you didn't feel like there was a need to touch on, or is that something that's not an issue in this document?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is a bit complicated, because when you're thinking about diverting water from Paradise Irrigation District in their watershed off to another watershed, there's always issues to be considered. So PID is still working on some permits from state agencies, and Tom can follow up on that. We don't know how that will turn out. They're doing watershed studies, environmental studies. So they still have some reports to do and paperwork to file in order to kind of perfect their water rights. So that's a situation just kind of needs to play out at the state level with PID. The other big issue is that it is a small watershed. So, for all smaller sized watersheds in Northern California, we live in a Mediterranean climate. So when it's wet like today, of course, there's a lot of water and streams are flowing. But when it's dry, it can be very, very dry. So Paradise Irrigation District, like all other small water districts, is still at a risk of drought in the future. And their watershed, because of the small size, is a bit flashy. There is a hydrologic graph in the appendix, the watershed appendix, that kind of shows that, as you look at kind of geologic time, and there, there is always the possibility of drought. So you would need someone to kind of look at the details, like modeling the hydrology of the watershed, and then make sure that any agreements to sell water protects PID in times of drought. Like you wouldn't want them to be obligated to sell water if it was really dry. So I trust that PID can look out for their best interests and make sure that they're protected.
I'll elaborate on that, Commissioner Kimmelshoe. So to be clear, this was thoroughly discussed in the option study that took over 3 years to go through. Mr. Lando, Mickey and I, we sat in on every single one of those hundreds of meetings, it seemed. The reality is the whole issue of water transfers came out of the idea that they needed to generate financial support for the district, not that other people necessarily needed that water. Once the situation in the finances became sound and we now are at a place with of fiscal stability, the district has no incentive any longer or the need to sell water to generate revenue. I'm not to say that it's not possible to do so should a need arise, but the purpose of even talking about those things in the option study was one of revenue generation for a sinking district. That district is now well afloat. And while those options may still be listed there, the impetus for us looking at them has evaporated. And I'm sure Mr. Lando can elaborate more on that, but your point's well taken that it still exists. And maybe somebody does promote that. But the reason we looked at it to begin with, not because we thought they had so much water that they could move it, it's whether or not they could sell some water to get by in the short term while they got their feet back under, and they're there now. And so that, to me, that motivation has largely disappeared. So that's why we did not go into depth about it, because from our perspective, we evaluated the district. It has plenty of water. It now has plenty of revenue. Therefore, the impetus or the initiative to take and look at selling water elsewhere is simply just not there, if that helps you.
No, and I appreciate those comments. Just a couple comments of my own. I would consider all of us in the same watershed. Okay. I would say that almost all of Butte County is in the same watershed. And secondly, I know this isn't probably the time or the place, but I think we need to look at our water use and our water availability in regards to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which a lot of us in the valley are trying to wrestle with and determine how we can find enough water to sustain our groundwater, possibly use more surface water than groundwater, so that in turn would help us sustain our groundwater. And the last thing is, I don't know, Mr. Lando might be able to talk about this, but even drought years, I think that there was and I don't want to say an enormous, but a more than adequate amount of water in Lake Paradise or Paradise Lake in order to service the citizens and the surrounding area possibly as well. So those are just my comments.
Yeah, I think
Thank you.
historically that.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I'll go ahead with mine. This mainly some format. On page 718, about halfway down, there's a sentence in there. It just says funding for this project was provided by a grant from the drinking period. So that needs to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sign us up.
Maybe it was meant to be that way.
Or that's what you wanted to read.
So that's one.
I'll make that correction. Thank you.
There's two figures, figure 8.2 on page 8-7 and figure 8.3 on page 8-10. And in the legend box, it doesn't say legend, but those color boxes which show which item is, I had to zoom in to see that. I thought they were bullet points at first. So if you could redo those two exhibits to make those boxes bigger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hard on my eyes. Yeah, you really couldn't tell the colors without really zooming in on that.
Okay.
Then on the table on page 8-7, on page 8-15, it references that the district maintains funds in the LAIF, which is the local agency investment fund operated by the state. I would like to see an explanation of what that is somewhere in there, maybe just a quick paragraph saying, it's run by the state. It generates interest for the district. A district can take out money at any time without a penalty, something along those lines,
Okay,
just for information for the public,
okay, that
so
would,
that, so they know what that is.
that would be easy to do. Thank you for that
And
suggestion.
then the final thing is, I'm gonna have to go down here, table 8-8 on page 815 also. And I'm not sure why I mentioned that. Let's see here. Oh, under table 8-8, current outstanding debt. That table doesn't show what the debts are and, you know, what are the terms of those debts, you know, the repayment.
Okay,
You did that in the next table, 8-8, where you showed the amounts and then you put the terms of the loans. So I think it would be nice if that reflected a little more information, that table reflected a little more information on
okay.
what, you know, how much those loans are for. And that's all I have. Well-written document, very thorough, very complete. And I do agree with all the determinations that are in there. I think they are spot on.
Okay, thank you. I'd be happy to make those changes after we receive formal direction from staff. So, okay, thank you.
Any more questions or comments?
One,
You got it?
one more comment. As relates to the format, given the date of the issuance of the document, and now we're up to the current times, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe Tom can respond to this. It seems to me there was a vacancy on the PID board that was advertised and everything, and maybe there's been a change in that, and that's not reflected in this document. Perhaps you may want to coordinate that with PID and LAFCo staff.
Yeah, I can update that.
Right, and then the other thing that came to mind, if I remember correctly, and I don't have the document in front of me nor on screen, but there was mention made about litigation that PID is involved with, and I'm wondering if the status of that, as depicted in the document, has changed from that date in December to today. Maybe it has. So again, you may want to coordinate with LAFCO staff and particularly with Tom and Mickey from PID. But
Yeah.
other than that, I agree with Stephen. It's an excellent document, very thorough, very professional,
Thank you.
very helpful for us.
I'll add a couple sentences, just updating the status of the litigation and check in with Tom about the current status of PID board members and make those corrections.
Any other
Thank you.
questions or
Yeah,
comments?
I don't have, well, comments mostly. Thank you for you guys that have that kind of detail.
Yeah.
I truly am impressed that you guys catch those things. I mean that sincerely, because I don't catch those things and I just read over that stuff. So thank you for that. But we talked about drought times and stuff like that. I just don't want that to stand. I know Mr. Lando's gonna come up and talk about it, but we don't have a abundance. We were in dire need in our drought times of water. And is there a way to get around that? I've already talked to congressmen and others saying, yes, there are. If you guys want to come up with money to raise the dam and do a bunch of work up there, there's ways to fix that and we'll have an abundance of water. Well, that's not interesting to them and or our governor. So we don't have that abundance in those times, but I know you guys will speak to that, so.
Anybody else have anything? Thank you for
Thank you.
your report. Mr. Lando? You
I'm
never
Lando
know,
at
you never
PID.
know what hat or shirt this guy's
That's
gonna
true.
wear.
I was just thinking, I've been in this room
Man
so
about
often,
town.
sitting over there. Actually, I came here, wasn't sure that I'd even need to speak, but let me work backwards through the many comments that were made, maybe starting with public participation. I think we all know that if it doesn't affect you, if it's a document that simply has status, people really don't get involved. In fact, I'm surprised there was even one letter. We did talk about this repeatedly at the board meeting over the last year, actually. Mainly from the perspective, and as Steve mentioned, we also had the option study, which was, the official title was something like Options of Providing Water to the Town of Paradise. I think that was actually the title of the study, and it was done by a UC under a grant from the state. So I personally was not at all surprised the public didn't jump in, but I do think they had many opportunities to do so. And at our board meetings, we had people show up and they listen to it, but they talk about other things, primarily water supply and finances. Let me talk about water supply for a second, because that is a complex issue. The fact is, right now with the Magalia Dam, because of seismic issues not being at full height, we do in the winter release water, and there is some potential to get income from that water. The board, along with the town, has been pretty adamant that that might be a future consideration, but let's make sure we have water for our residents first and the rebuild first. We are pursuing, in fact, we got a grant and we're most of the way through the design for the revised Magalia Dam in cooperation with the town and the county. Ironically, that's being held up by FEMA. We started to do borings and they said, we've got to research where you're doing borings, and that took about a year to do, without exaggeration. The cost is about $60 million to rebuild that dam. We have virtually every agency in the North State agreeing that ought to happen. The question is, where the heck does that money come from? We are looking at the various water rights we have. We're trying to perfect our major water right, which is the oldest license in the state of California. The problem with that is it's also a very lengthy process, probably a 2 to 3 year process. The district started before the fire and stopped. We've restarted that effort. We're about a year into it. In fact, the environmental impact report, the draft environmental impact report, should be released sometime this summer. It then goes to the state. I already know there are many organizations that will ask for additional water rights. Right now, we release 0.5 CFS for fisheries. That's the first thing we have to do under that license. I know for a fact there's going to be requests to release more than that for the fisheries. I also suspect, as the county is dealing with the Miocene Canal, there are folks there that have no water rights but think they should, that I assume this permit will get hung up in the middle of. As was mentioned, there is a possibility during times we have overflows to, in fact, sell water. It would help the district financially. It would help other areas. The Groundwater Sustainability Act actually suggests that the Chico area get 5,000 acre feet a year from Paradise. Our board, and I think the town as well, has said, hey, hold off. Let's make sure we have enough water for rebuild before we do that. I'm going to move on from that. I'm going to next talk about cooperation. We received tremendous cooperation from the town. The town and the district work very well together, and it's a complex issue. And we support anything the town can do to assist speeding up rebuild, which they've done a great job of. If you look at the number of housing units built in Paradise, compare it to anywhere, I don't care how big the area is, you'll see we're right up there. We being, frankly, the town, because we don't have control of those permits. We already talked about the letter. There are some factual errors in the letter. We met with the town. The consultant was gracious enough with LAFCo to correct from the town's perspective, correct the population numbers and the projections. In terms of the standby rate, to me, this is one that's very confused. First of all, just being direct about it, when you leave property, and particularly a lot of these people left the state, doesn't mean you don't have to pay your property taxes. You still pay property taxes. In our case, very specifically, we've had to install, not had to, we wanted to install laterals across streets to virtually every property. We got some FEMA money, but we're also using district money. Part of that money that Steve mentioned in our reserve is capital project money. We have to front that money. We believe we're putting those property owners in a positive position. It's their benefit to pay this fee, because there's going to be a lateral in the street when they go to rebuild, and they're not going to have to tear up the street. And frankly, probably under town requirements, which I would agree with, have to rebuild the street, because you don't want to have a brand new street and then tear it up. We do have a program in which we give a discount, fairly substantial discount, to disadvantaged individuals, to answer that question. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm trying to see what else was on my list. Oh, our total budget. Right now, we are spending a fairly large amount on capital, both because of the rebuild and because the district, prior to the Camp Fire, frankly, was behind. So, for example, we have a whole new vehicle fleet. which we used in part thanks to our negotiations with the settlement court. We are not in litigation anymore with the settlement court. We just released to allow our last payment to come in, which we're hoping we receive shortly, not sure of the amount. If you don't know, the settlement court sold off all the remaining stock they had. They originally thought they had 13.5 billion. Now they have 14+ billion, but it'll pay about, as I understand it, about 70% of the agreed to claims. So there'll still be people who are left short of money, which is a whole nother issue. Part of our issue with operating costs. So we in part are living off investments of the money that was mentioned that we will spend down once we're financially sound. But throughout the rebuild, we're probably, I'm gonna use the wrong term, but I'm gonna use it because it occurs to me, we're probably overstaffed by about 20 to 30%. And that's because we're running around all over town doing rebuild work. In the next, I'm gonna say 5 years, hopefully sooner, that work will all be accomplished. And through attrition, we'll cut back and our operating costs will also be reduced. So that the district, the board is, I think, very aware of the finances and working on them every day to make sure we, in fact, into the future, not just today, but in the future, are financially sound. I want to say one more thing, and that is, because it occurs to me, tremendous working relationship with the town. We meet every week. We talk about how we coordinate projects. The town has been very helpful. We're happy to help the town in any way we can. It's been a great working relationship, and it also has been with the county, frankly. The county's helped us a great deal, including, for example, we ran a parallel water line, so we had backup water all the way back to our treatment plant. That ran through a county road. County staff was great in allowing us to work at night and get that done. So those are my comments. Happy to answer questions.
Questions by the board?
Thank you for mentioning the county. Very much. We appreciate that very much.
Are you connected with the county?
Yeah, we are. And secondly, how, if someone does not pay their standby charge, they've left the state.
Yeah.
You know, if the county, if they don't pay their property taxes after 5 years, it's supposed to go up for auction. Those are liens against the property. Are the standby fees also liens against the property?
We, at the end of the year, will lien any unpaid bills, and then they go against the property taxes, and you just described the process.
Mhm. And what would you say, what percentage of folks have just abandoned the property and are not paying those standby fees? Or just are not paying those standby fees? I mean, is that happening to some degree?
I'm not aware of that happening. I am aware of some folks vociferously complaining about it.
Okay.
And primarily, honestly, primarily they're out of state. And I don't have much sympathy because those properties are saleable. There's value in that. I think we might have made a tactical mistake as a district, and that is we got these comments and we said, we went to the board, we looked at how other districts handle it, and we said, no, it's appropriate to pay the standby fee. Our attorney recommended, and I'm sorry, Steve and LAFCo staff, our attorney recommended, well, you can always petition LAFCo to get disannexed from the district. I'm trying to think of the right word.
Detached.
And we told them directly that we did not believe, nor would recommend that happen. But it did create some additional workload and some additional disgruntled folks for LAFCO. We did have initially, I'm going to say a handful, maybe a dozen of folks that were really upset about it. We don't have that many that really are. They understand it. In fact, we actually had the opposite. We had folks saying, these folks are allowed to pay the standby fee, but if they don't pay the standby fee, they can come in, because we had this policy until last July, and just reconnect without cost. Meantime, I'm paying $21.49 a month and I don't get any special right. So they were very upset these folks weren't paying the standby rate. And I'm backing up because it's just stuff that, of course, you go through and you remember. We gave individuals 2 years to connect at the $21.49, and they'd be able to, in fact, then we would waive the connection fee and capacity fee. So people had a lot of notice. We sent out mailers, we sent out individual letters at least 3 different times to every owner. So I don't know if that answers.
And so that's, the standby fee is $21.49 a month,
I believe I have the number correct. Yes.
roughly.
Yes.
Okay.
It is.
And there are other issues too. Just for instance, across the street from me, I'm trying to find the people. The place is a mess. It's got all kinds of junk on it and no taxes have been paid, nothing. They both passed away. And I'm trying to find family and I'll buy the property, I'll clean it up. I can't find them. So there's that's happening.
The other issue, I'm glad you made me trip to this too. The other issue we have with that standby fee and water is that there's fire risk. So people need to have access to I forget what we call it, interim water service. So at least they can control weeds on their property.
Right.
Sounds like it's a tangible asset and it's warranted to charge it.
Tom,
My
Tom, do you-
personal dealings, I've paid South Feather on bare land to keep a meter there for 20 years.
Yeah.
Just because I didn't want interruption and have to, so it makes sense to me. Go ahead.
Tom, do you have any input to offer about all the various suggestions recommended in the MSR study?
No, I think that we agree with those suggestions. I would say, following my board's directive, I would say two things. I would say that we have a very cooperative relationship with the town. And that we continue to look at ways to assist each other in whatever way we can, whether it be equipment or storage, et cetera. I think there are always things that should be looked at. The option study looked at it, but I would say, just to be direct about it, the board at this point is not particularly interested in consolidation. I think it's a viable thing to look at. I wouldn't disagree with that.
Well, there, amongst those recommendations, there was one in reference to PID and PRPD. I'm wearing the other hat now, but do you have any comment on that one? It talks about the possibility of latent services, active recreation services, that PID become latent and just let PRPD run those.
No, I think we agree with that.
Okay.
And we've provided the lake to the district. I think that's appropriate. I think that's what the district does.
Sure.
So no, I agree with that.
Okay. Just thought I'd ask.
Okay.
That's all. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments, Mr. Lando? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other public comment on this matter? Would you like to speak, anyone? I'm gonna close public comment. It's obvious that there's going to be some changes. Did the staff get all of that written down? And do you think we can cover it with a motion today, or should we bring it back in the future? There's quite a few. So.
I have made a list of them and I'm certain that Ms. Harrison has as well. So I'm confident that with that list and a motion that includes that list, these are technical or grammatical changes. These are not policy or substance changes. So I think it's appropriate to move.
Could we
forward.
read all those into the record? Then I'll ask somebody to make a motion to include them.
I will make an attempt to do so. And if I miss some, please help me.
Well, I mean, we know how this works, right? Let's get it right.
So on, with respect to Mr.
Mr. Brown's
Stonebraker's
smiling.
letter, one of the items is doing the correction from 6:30 to 5:30 for the meeting time. And the other correction that we would make is renaming chapter 2 to chapter 3, as it should say. So that covers his letter. The rest of it was unrelated to any of those kinds of changes. Commissioner Batts had indicated that he had changes to page 7-1, page 8-7 and 8-15 related to the way those tables were presented. And I have that down and I will follow up with Mr. Betts just to make sure. The only other question that came up that I did not get an answer to, in fact, if you don't mind now, I'll ask Mr. Lando right now, is the board vacancy question, has that been filled?
I just thought about that. If you thought about corrections. You are correct, and the letter is correct. Tuesday night, we did appoint Patricia Gilroy to the board to fill Mark Sulick's vacant position.
Okay.
So we will make that correction. So add that to your list. And the last question that Mr. McGrean had asked about, which was the outcome of the litigation. We had listed the litigation, but not necessarily the outcome of it. I don't, that's important. And I think we could add a quick definition of where that is in time. It's not going to change the content. The litigation is the litigation, but it wouldn't be difficult for us to put some time frame, whether it's concluded or still pending. Would that satisfy your concern, Mr. Maria?
Well, it's helpful in the sense that after those listing litigation, there's a reference saying in the study, if I remember correctly, that they'd like to see less litigation over time. Well, now you've got something that you can point out within the context of that report that's underway.
I think it's entirely appropriate that we do that, and we can certainly do that at a staff level. It's a very minor addition.
Up to the commission as a whole. It's not up to me individually. So
So unless I missed any of yours, Mr. Betts, I think that's the list that I had written down.
One commissioner asked for a change on page 8-5 about giving a better description of the LAIF funds.
Right.
And then table 8-8 regarding debt, a commissioner asked for more detail on the quantity of debt. And then there was a graphic that needed to have a zoom in to fix the colors on figures 8-2 and 8-3.
There was also the meeting time, which is 5:30.
Yeah. he got
Correct.
that.
I got that. So there are, as now my adjusted list says, there are 8 items that we can make those minor corrections to. I fully believe those are minor. They're not substantial policy or substance changes. And if the commission feels so fit, whoever makes a motion, just ask that the staff, this motion include corrections to those 8 items.
Okay. We're gonna call this modifications.
Correct.
I move what he just said. I don't want to reiterate it.
and I'll second.
So we have a motion that approves this municipal service review as modified on the 8 points that's put into the record. And acting as a lead agency pursuant to California Environmental Quality Act guidelines, find that Paradise Irrigation District Municipal Service Review Update is categorically exempt from the provisions of CEQA under section 15-306, information collection. Find the MSR update satisfies state law, direct staff to prepare a final MSR, which include adopting resolution, any comments received regards to the public review draft MSR. And I was glad to put words in your mouth. So that was the motion. We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good work, everybody. And the reason I was careful is that when it gets complicated, we don't want something to come back and hang us. Mr. Brown's nodding his head. Thank you.
Good to see you become a regulator, Mr. Conley.
Yeah, it took years, but you got me. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next thing, which is we have nothing removed from the consent agenda. We're gonna go to 4.2, the formation of the Tuscan Water District, affirmation of election results. And I want to repeat, affirmation of election results. That's all we're considering on this today. Go ahead.
I'm almost speechless after giving 4,000 speeches over the last 3 years about this, but we have concluded the process. The vote has taken. You see that attached. It overwhelmingly passed. At this point, as Mr. Connolly pointed out, we're just affirming that the election was certified and the outcome was favorable to the formation. And you are simply now directing me to file the certificate of completion, which I will do. And with the filing of the recording, the minute that stamp hits the paper, the Tuscan Water District officially exists. So all you have to do today is take the action requested to direct me to file the certificate of completion.
Questions or comments by board members? Is there public comment on this matter? We'll close the public comment. Wishes of the board.
Move approval.
Second.
You have a second? Everything good?
Well, Al, let's say Al, okay?
Oh,
We both said it at the same time.
Flip a coin. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
If I might, Mr. Connolly,
Yes, please.
I don't often do this, but I want to sincerely thank all of you who went through that entire process. It was a lot of information. It was a lot of very technical information, highly charged, highly political. I read a lot out there in the world about what people say about things, and I hear about transparency and lacks thereof. And I can honestly say that anybody who thinks that this commission put a rubber stamp on this project is living on some other planet. You put out 400+ pages of documentation over a period of 2.5 years to support your decision. You asked good questions, you ran solid meetings, and we came to what was the legally correct outcome, and we took politics out of it. And I really, really appreciate each and every, because this is not something that every elected board does. So it's from me to you to thank you for supporting your staff through this process. And I think the outcome is what it should be. So
Well, I
thank you.
thank you for saying that, but Steve, I don't know how I know how you have hair left after all that. That was an incredible amount of work for you and your staff, and you guys, it's unbelievable. I mean, you guys did an incredible job. So thank you from me, and I think the rest of us too, for what you did and your staff did. That was
Thank you.
Unreal.
Really?
Moving on. Oh, sorry, Bill, that's your job.
I'd just like to say that factually, the district was formed per the law, and we made every adjustment possible as a board to take on any legitimate public comment, including the makeup of the board, size of well, where you live, and all of that. And yet, we all took heed, as the staff did, in the paper especially, but it was based on emotion and some wanting to change state law. So to the folks out there that thought this was done wrong, go change the state law, because we followed the law to the letter and asked for legitimate, I think very legitimate compromise in the makeup of this board, so it does serve the public in general. We did a good job of it. Moving on, the appointment of the budget committee for the 2024-25 year. Who did we have last year?
I was on
It's
it.
in your form. It was Commissioners Kimmelshue, Johnson, McGrean, and Betts.
So moved. You don't think I didn't do that on
I got that
purpose?
second first.
Any comment on that? Any public comment on that?
Oh, boy.
All those in favor say aye.
So those of you, you remember sometime in the next few weeks, you're going to get an email from Crystal, most likely inviting you to, or pick some dates, and then we will meet at our office and do what we do. And I know we'll bring you extra copies, Mr. Kimmelshue.
I mean, it's,
Easiest meeting in the world.
it's
Yeah,
the-
thank you.
but it's very educational. I mean, and it's good to have, I did it for several years. You learn quite a bit about the operation. And I think you did a good job. Let's do it again. Next up, executive, public comment. Anybody would like to speak from the public on anything not on the agenda? We cannot take action, but we can listen to you. Okay, you're allowed to call us names by law. I mean, geez, whatever. Let it go. Thank you.
Do you have some favorites?
Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, I think. She's running against me. Anyway, reports and communication, executive officers report.
So I just, the first one is just, I'd like to keep you up to date on some things that are more critical than not. I know you don't like to get into the minutia. The result of, so we went through that contractual amendment with the county. I wasn't pleased with the way it went down, but we are here, and we have put a lot of hours into converting over to Paylocity, which is our new software program that we use for creating payroll. Really, the point of this bullet item is to give credit to Crystal Bradford. Crystal didn't take this job thinking she was going to become an HR expert. But as we'll talk later, perhaps in closed session about, what it's like to work with a very small, consistent staff, is you do what comes up onto your plate. Crystal pulled some hair out. You couldn't tell because it's so long, but she has really just done a remarkable job of learning this. And there's been some struggles, but we're there. There's a few things left to happen, but I just want you all to recognize Crystal for the work she put in on it.
Thank you.
And the other part here is the process that the executive officer to consider future organizational structures for our agency. And it talks a lot about staff position changes, hiring, and so forth. That I'm just letting you know that there's an ongoing process here, and perhaps we will be talking about that later. But this is just an effort on your staff to just to make sure that we have good continuity moving forward. And I will talk more about that at a later date as well. But it's all good, so don't fret. Moving into project general notes. I've already talked to Mr. Connolly because this is his district principally, but all the information you had received and heard from Mr. Todd Hickman concerning North Yuba Water District and how that might affect South Feather. I have spent a lot of time looking into those documents and conferring with South Feather and a few others, my colleagues in Yuba. I'm not saying that I am complete yet, but by and large, and I've shared this with Mr. Hickman just this week, is our fundamental purpose is to look out for our districts in our county. That's what Butte LAFCo's role is. We have no authority over districts that are in other counties. We can certainly, when they're cooperatively affecting ours, we can offer our comments and hope that they make take those comments constructively. And I think that some of our comments have been. But as far as South Feather's concerned, I'm satisfied at this point that the issues that may affect them are not going to be impacted by this. I also want to say that nobody has also disputed what Mr. Hickman has produced. Unfortunately, it's on the other side of the county boundary where the problem is. And as much as I, for one, just as a public servant, would like to help him solve what I believe is a real problem down south, it's not my jurisdiction and it's not your jurisdiction. So what I foresee is in the next couple of weeks is I will conclude what I think, and I will probably ask the commission just offer a simple letter that we will then essentially say that this stuff is concerning to us, but then formally ask Yuba LAFCo to do what they should be doing to evaluate their own district and try to resolve some of his issues. It's not, we just cannot do that. But I also, as I think someone said here today, it's a credit when anybody from the public comes up, does a lot of research and comes here and says, somebody take a look at this, please. At least I give him credit for trying hard to correct what he believes is a bad situation. We're just probably not the right vehicle to get it done. And if it ever were to affect South Feather in some substantial way, I'd be the first one back here in front of you to let's do something about that. But at this point, South Feather isn't telling me that this is not the crisis as it's portrayed for them. It certainly is a crisis across the border. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. There's nothing more to really discuss about it.
Okay, we have someone else to do public comment on that. Come on on.
Good morning. I'm Marieke Fournet, President of North Yuba Water District. I'm appreciating the possibility to speak, and I would welcome Mr.
Lucas.
to reach out to us. Also, our manager, Leona Harris, is here. She sent a very detailed letter responding to any of those issues that were raised by Mr. Hickman. And that letter should have taken care of any concerns you may have had.
I will reach out to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being
Thank you.
here. I wondered why you're here. Then I started thinking maybe you just like this, you know?
Moving on to this, there's nothing else really new, but except for if something happened since I wrote this. We've had we had an opportunity to meet with the city of Gridley's new city administrator, excuse me. Shannon's kind of been on point on this, so I'm going to let her just share what kind of came out of that meeting. And I'll just say it's positive from my perspective.
Yeah, we met earlier this week with the new city administrator, Elisa Artiga. She has 24 years of experience working for the city of Gridley, so she knows the ins and outs. She's been there. She's seen a lot. So We took the opportunity to meet with her and included the irrigation and drainage districts that surround the city of Gridley. So Butte Water District, the Joint Waters District, the Biggs West Gridley Water District, and Reclamation District 833 were all present, and their engineer was present. And we just sort of hashed out some of the issues that we've had as far as development goes around the city of Gridley. The main concern of the districts is the encasement of the canals that needs to occur when multifamily or residential development happens adjacent to the canals. And we've just had some pretty poor communication between the districts and the city prior to this. And so with their new city administrator, we wanted to take the opportunity to start off on the right foot. Like Steve said, it was a very positive and productive meeting. She's very open to hearing and including the districts in their process. And so we've all parties involved have agreed to move forward with some sort of formal agreement that includes the districts in the development process in the city of Gridley, so that there's no confusion as developers come in and turn in their development applications. So.
And I think what this really highlights is not only the progression that we're having with the city of Gridley, which we appreciate, is this is the kind of stuff that it doesn't result in staff reports or subject matter in front of you to decide on, but this is the kind of stuff your staff and you have instructed me over the years, get involved, solve problems. And we could have easily stayed out of this, but this problem would not have gone away without our intervention. So Shannon has put a lot of hours into making connections and building relationships with those folks, and it's paid off. And I think moving forward, we have high expectations that the issues that we've experienced will go away. And that's by and large, your staff just getting out and talking to people. Sometimes you might get a call saying, why the heck is Steve down here sticking his nose in my business? But usually there's a good reason I'm sticking my nose in somebody's business. So anyhow, I want to give Shannon credit for really taking the lead on this, and that for you to letting us do this kind of stuff, because it solves problems and before they blow up into legal situations. So
When did the new city administrator come on board?
She officially started, I want to say December 18th or so.
22nd.
22nd. So yeah, she's
Okay.
less than a month into
And
the.
is she aware of the MSR SOI update?
Yeah, we briefly discussed the MSR is in its very beginning phases, and she understands the need to update the MSR, and she's excited about that process.
Thank you.
And I can make a comment. She's been with the city for, like I said, 24 years, started at the bottom, basically in the finance department. I've known her since 2006. So she's very aware of very aware of the roller coaster at the city. We're coming out of a 3-year basically no building going on in the city of Gridley, when prior we had 15 different projects that got completed. So this is a positive thing, in my opinion. Her taking over, she's very willing to she wants to bring a building into Gridley, very open-minded. Asked me, hey, I'd like to go to one of your LAFCo meetings, and actually every board meeting that I'm on, she'd like to go at least to learn about it. So she's definitely and I gave her an opinion of mine. I said one of the first things you need to look at is figure out the planning, or how planning works in the city of Gridley. So it's a very positive thing. I'm very happy. I've been discouraged for the last 3 years, but now I'm very happy.
Good news, man.
So moving forward, it's going to be positive.
moving on, Cal LAFCo, just a quick note, let you know that Shannon Costa has been working on the staff workshop. This will be her second workshop working for Cal on this Cal LAFCo committee. This is going to be in Pleasanton. Actually, I think she's involved in 2 different workshops. So I don't want her head to get too big today, but she's reaching out and doing and participating in these Cal LAFCo events, and I know how much benefit that was to me moving forward. And I think as much as it can be frustrating at times, it gets you out there. And I now folks around the state know, hey, they don't just know me from Butte LAFCo. Now they know Shannon from Butte LAFCO. Oh, and this guy named Bill.
Yeah. I'm the ex-president.
Along with that on
Commissioner,
legislation, Commissioner Connolly, myself, Mr. Brown have all been appointed to the Ledge Committee again, which is great because it keeps Butte LAFCO involved, and we get to have a, if you will, an outside say in how things move through that process. And it's slow and it's arduous and it's sometimes nauseating to sit through, but that's legislation, I guess. Nonetheless, we're there and we don't miss a beat. Every month we're on a meeting and we're talking about things that affect our LAFCO. So you're well represented at the state level. Application activity you can see, and with that, I have nothing else to add unless you have questions for me.
If I might, just one quick question. It seems like there's been some legislation or some legislators that have been working to reduce the amount of authority that LAFCO has in the counties. I know there was an issue in Ventura County in regards to a water district in that area. Is that, do you see that? Is that ongoing? Is there?
Yeah.
It's constantly ongoing, unfortunately. Yeah, okay.
I don't know if I'd characterize it as an assault on LAFCO's authority across all levels. They're not telling us to stop doing MSRs or stop doing SOIs. What they're doing consistently is just going around us on very specific issues. And, you know, we've not had that problem here, but what you're describing is just that. Folks who are not happy in their local area, they want to move a process forward. It's a constituency all into themselves. LAFCO, being what you are, a neutral body trying to work through it, so much easier for them to go find a willing legislator who will carry a bill that just says, skip the LAFCO process entirely and go to the finish. And that is absolutely wrong. We have, you'd be proud of Mr. Connolly. He's made it very clear on many fronts forcefully that this is wrong, remains wrong. And at Cal LAFCO, it's our policy platform on the board is to fight these at every single turn.
So we had to make a decision at state LAFCO. Make it not an issue to go around rational growth, preservation of farmland, combining, dissolving, creating special districts. And the way the legislature does it, if there's a developer or a group of people, mainly it looks like money to me, and they want water delivered over here or sewer delivered, or they want a park district that makes no sense combined with another one, or even a division, they'll go to a legislator and they'll go through the legislation and get the governor to sign it and go around us. So what I tried to do is get state LAFCO to say, hey, let's make this difficult. Let's have a voice because we are standing for preservation of farmland, rational growth, right? And also reach out to the League of Cities and the special districts because we should be on the same page overall. But to answer your question, it happens every year in different ways. It could be a casino, or it could be a housing project, or it could be, who knows, a wind farm. But they go around us because we're here to say that's not rational. It doesn't serve the interests of the people. And unfortunately, educating legislators is hard to do. And I think term limits, obviously going on my 5th term, but it's bad because about the time you get them educated the right way to do something, they go on and do something else. So I'll leave you with that. Oh, class dismissed.
No, you have to go to.
Closed session?
Yeah.
Oh, this class is dismissed until March, then the public can come back.
You have to
March
read the
7th.
item, Bill. Read the item off.
I see that. We have a closed session now. We have to. Thanks for coming by. And the way I look at your situation, if you guys have a complaint, you'll go to your LAFCO down there. The people are unhappy, they'll go to Yuba County's LAFCO.
Probably have yours somewhere. I'm not sure.
Okay,
Oh, good.
so if you're happy, we're happy. We're here for the people. Yeah.
I did one meeting with Ray.
He had nothing but positive things to say about the new administration.
Yeah, we worked really hard.
So I would love to talk to both your names. All right.
Thank you.
Where do you live at? Out of curiosity. Well, if we can meet somewhere in between, whatever works for you both, I don't come to.
Here, you can come to Brown.
Tell you what, send me an email.
Okay.
That way we can get connected
Yes.
and then we'll work on a date.
Okay.
Sound
perfect.
good?
Did you get the letter that we sent?
Oh, sure. I just can't remember.
We made.
I can.
It,
Let's talk more.
yeah, okay.
And we'll get through this.
Yeah, all right, thank you very
All
much.
right.
Thank you.
The closed session is gonna be in that little fireside.
I'll just tell them to, same as last year.
I thought you were just gonna have like one of those big. I should have got a sandbag, filled it up and put the big dollar sign on it and say, I'm just gonna push this across the table to Mr. Lucas. Just bag full of gold doubloons.
Scott,
Good morning,
how's it
Steve.
going?
See you.
She's not yet-
How many signed up for your hunter safety course?
He got his, all his hairs are going in the same direction. That's.
Yeah, let's start out with you there.
Don't know if you see the class.
How you doing?
Well, you
Not
can,
gonna work out.
you're full now.
Okay, next time.
I do it one day.
Well done. Well done. Yeah. I know that.
If you just ask. Report out of closed session. Okay, well, let's wait for at least the quorum to get in the room.
Thank you.
You don't need all of us there, right?
Okay, we have a quorum. We do have a report out of closed session. Our counselor, Mr. Scott Brown, will do that for me.
Yes, the commission met in closed session to discuss personnel and specifically the evaluation of the executive officer. Certain actions were taken in that closed session, one of which was to approve the evaluation. The second was to affect the executive officer's compensation, to give him the same raise as other employees in the commission are receiving. And in addition, a $5,000 bonus payable immediately in recognition of his completion of significant accomplishments this year. The vote was unanimous by all of the commissioners.
We also formed a subcommittee for a transition.
Yes.
If you-
And you, who's on the committee?
Al, myself. Mr.
Here we
Betts,
are.
Steve.
Okay. Other than that, there was no other reportable action out of closed session.
All right, class dismissed, see you on March 7th.